The Israeli military says troops accidentally shot and killed 3 hostages held by Hamas. The IDF says the hostages were killed during operations near Gaza City. Officials say troops mistakenly identified them as a threat. All 3 of the hostages were identified and their bodies returned to Israel. Charlie D'Agata reports from Tel Aviv.
In the chaos of the street battles underway in Gaza, 3 Israeli hostages are now no longer counted among the missing, but confirmed dead. Killed by Israel Defense Forces, mistakenly opening fire after identifying the 3 young men as a threat. Claiming full responsibility, IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari expressed what he called deep sorrow for the tragic incident. The victims include 25-year-old motorcycle enthusiast Samar Talalka and Yotam Haim, who was kidnapped from the Kfar Aza kibbutz. The 28-year-old musician filmed this video on that morning when Hamas gunmen rampaged through his community before abducting him. A 3rd hostage killed, 26-year-old Alon Shamriz, a computer engineering student from the same kibbutz. Israeli soldiers showed us around Kfar Aza just days after the massacre. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is in Israel to look for ways to lessen the ferocity of the war, if not to help end it. Today, he visited the West Bank to meet Palestinian authorities Mahmoud Abbas, in part to discuss who will govern Gaza next.
The Israeli government has indicated that it does not have a long-term plan to occupy Gaza, and that ultimately the control of Gaza, the administration of Gaza, and the security of Gaza has to transition to the Palestinians.
How and when the war ends is a question many are asking here and in the U.S. But a timetable tonight is as elusive as any semblance of peace. All anyone can agree is that it's months away.
Charlie D'Agata joins us now from Tel Aviv. Charlie, what's the reaction been to the news that Israeli forces killed these Israeli hostages?
Catherine, it is anger. Sadness over the tragedy. The Israeli military said the incident is under review. So we know they were killed during a combat mission. 3 young men were mistakenly seen as threats. An investigation is underway. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement tonight saying, "My heart goes out to the grieving families in this difficult time." But what we know is that combat forces are working in tandem with hostage rescue forces in this dynamic environment because negotiations are no longer taking place. And in this situation, they are trying to find the hostages, trying to hunt down Hamas militants and the hostages themselves. And this is all happening in a very kinetic environment. And what we saw today and what we learned today is what can happen with these 3 young men who found themselves in the middle of this combat environment, who were shot dead. And again, the Israeli forces coming out immediately and saying, expressing remorse and sadness for what's happened here. But in the chaos of that battlefield, I think it's something that we can expect over the next few weeks and months.
It's a very important point, and I want to take that a step further for the audience. So we essentially have 2 different tracks, the way that you describe it, Charlie. We've got this military combat track, and then we have this hostage rescue trap in this very kinetic environment, right? And what we saw, unfortunately, today is where the 2 intersect in a very sad way.
Yes, because we were brought to the tunnels. We went on a very brief embed today to this huge tunnel, and in those tunnels, combat is also taking place. We have Israeli forces who are trying to hunt down the hostages, also facing Hamas fighters, facing booby traps and facing Hamas fighters that are popping up out of these tunnels. At the very same time, and this is a very important point, the Israelis say that there are 2 primary importances here. That's what was told to us by Daniel Hagari today. The IDF spokesman said, we have 2 different channels going on here. We are here to fight Hamas militants, but we're also here to rescue hostages. And sometimes these things intersect. So they are trying to get the hostages out, but this is a rescue mission. This is not a negotiation situation at the moment. They are trying to, while they're moving forward, they're also trying to hunt down, find the hostages, and to rescue them. They have not been that successful yet in that regard.
And for some balance, what do the next few weeks and months ahead look like for the Palestinians in Gaza? And is there any sense we could be nearing the end of this second phase?
So the second phase is all about the combat mission, the ground combat mission. What we experienced, what we've seen for ourselves in our previous embed around places like Beit Hanun and Gaza City, those were largely airstrikes. Artillery was involved. We spoke to officials here and Israeli military officials who told us that this part really needs to be done on the ground. But what's happening is, 80% of the population inside Gaza, which was already a very concentrated area in terms of population, they have now been forced into the southwest area of Gaza itself. So Israeli forces, as they press on to try to rid that area of Hamas militants and leadership, they're facing an even more concentrated population in that region. And what we have been told by Israeli officials is that about half of the high-ranking Hamas officials, about 7,000 of the leadership, the military leadership, has been destroyed or killed. That's only about half. And now what they're looking for is to try to get rid of the rest of the Hamas figures, military figures and leadership in that tight corner. And this is where it gets difficult. So in terms of, a timeline, it's impossible to know. And certainly the Israelis don't want to share any of that. But the suffering for the Palestinians, now that winter has moved in, is just going to get worse and worse by the day, including the number of casualties in this fight.
Charlie D'Agata, thank you for bringing us all sides of the story.